Okay,
Okay.
this is recording. Okay, Derek, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So go ahead and ask your
Okay,
question again.
what about the movie, Derek? Yeah, what about the movie Light of Hope, the movie series that you've done? How did you manage to collect the efforts of the fan? How did you get the idea? How did you manage to make such a very good movie about Dragon Ball?
Yes, Dragon Ball Z Light of Hope has been a big success, and I'm grateful for that. I was living in Los Angeles at the time when I was approached by the producer and director of Light of Hope, Donnie and Rita McMillan, and they had this
Okay.
idea that they wanted to create a live-action Dragon Ball Z. And Dragon Ball Evolution had been out for a number of years, and that was a complete failure. And many people
It
in
was
the
totally
Dragon Ball
failure.
fan,
Yeah,
yeah, complete
yeah,
failure. People thought you couldn't do it; it's impossible. Nobody can ever create a live-action Dragon Ball. It just cannot be done. But I never agreed with them. I always thought, of course you can. All you have to do is stay true to the source material that made Dragon Ball popular in the first place. It's not that difficult. You just have to be respectful of Akira Toriyama's original vision.
yes.
So I thought about it, and I had never written a movie script before. I had worked on a couple movies. I had been an extra in some films in Hollywood, just as a fun thing to do and make a little bit of cash. But I had never written a full script, so it was a challenge. I knew it was going to be difficult, but
You write
I
the
said
script yourself, Derek. You write it yourself.
yes, yeah, the whole thing.
Okay.
Um, I realized I asked myself, like, what would Goku do in this situation if he was faced with a challenge and something that he'd never done before? And I understood that Goku would take the challenge head on. He would charge forward and do it.
Train, and a lot of training, and do and try again and again till he succeeds.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I said yes, and then I decided to write it. And they told me that they wanted to do a story about the history of Trunks, which is a side story of Dragon Ball Z, involving Trunks and Gohan and these killer androids who have destroyed the world.
Yes.
And they were interested in that story because it was darker than the rest of Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball is a very lighthearted series. It has some dark moments, but overall it's a light and funny series with a lot of bright colors and things like that. But they were more interested in the darkness and the seriousness of it. And
Yes.
they were big fans of the Terminator series and this idea of time travel and this post-apocalyptic world. And that arc of Dragon Ball is also inspired by the Terminator. So that was the one that they felt most interested in. And they were also considering doing one about Battle of Gods, like an adaptation of the Dragon Ball Z film Battle of Gods, with Beerus, the god of destruction, and things like that. But that ended up not happening. And so we focused all on this one. And then I decided to just write a series that I felt, three. It was going to be 3 episodes long, and
Yeah.
in fact, after the first episode came out, it was such a massive success, beyond what we thought. It now has over 30 million views on YouTube. That we ended up getting more money for the second episode, and then the third episode, and then there became we had some creative differences between myself and Rita and Donnie, the producer and director, and we ended up arguing a lot over how to take the series forward, because now that it was a success, people were looking at it differently. Back,
Of course.
even
Yes.
though I had written all 3 episodes already, they wanted to do different things, and
Yes.
they wanted to approach it differently, and so we had arguments. Um, and then what happened was they ended up putting out episode 2 that I wrote as if it were episode 2 and 3, by dividing episode 2 in half and then putting them together as if they were 2 episodes. But unfortunately, my episode 3 that I wrote has never actually been filmed and published, so nobody's ever read
Okay.
it except for them. So there's actually more to the story that people have never been able to see, and I hope that someday it gets produced, but it's unlikely that it ever will. But in any case, what is out there, people have really enjoyed, and
Yes, yes.
I still get compliments about it, and I'm really glad that people enjoyed it so much. And I
It is
think
very nice, Derek. The movie is very vivid, and the actors, are they fans or they are professional actors?
no, yeah, the actors are professional actors living in Hollywood, but they're also Dragon Ball Z fans, and so that made a big difference. And I think that's the key to delivering a genuine live action Dragon Ball that fans enjoy, is because there's certain things that you can only really understand about Dragon Ball if you already are a fan and you have grown up with the series or you've become immersed in it to the point where you sort of feel it,
Yes.
like you just know what's right and what's wrong. And that's something that Hollywood just didn't understand with Dragon Ball Evolution, and it's obvious, in every scene. They just didn't get it. But these guys, they really got it, and I think the fans watching it at home can see that.
We can feel it. We can feel it, Derek. They're acting with passion and they know what they are doing. They know Dragon Ball and they know how serious it is. Their role were brilliant, especially the villains. I like them a lot, especially the android.
Mm. Yeah, I
And
agree, and the fight choreography was really good too.
the yes, the production was so professional and the directing was so professional. Derek, how did you do it? How did you get a movie out with this professional themes and this professional production and directing?
Well, I mean, it all starts with the script, the story. You can have um, a great cast, but if the script is garbage, then you're going to end
Yes.
up with a product that nobody likes. So I really poured myself into the script and tried to make a series that reflected Toriyama's spirit and what he would have tried to express in a dramatic adaptation of his work in live action. And then from there, the director and the producer, they have experience working in Hollywood as well, and all the actors have experience. But we're all still young, late 20s, early 30s, and everybody was still learning as they went. So the fact that they pulled off that level of quality at such a young age is impressive.
Yes, yes, brilliant. They are your friends, or you knew them when you started to make the movie? Oh,
Yeah, I met them for the first time, working on the movie together, and
okay,
yeah, I wasn't familiar with them until then. A couple of their
okay,
stories are in my book, Dragon Soul: 30 Years of Dragon Ball Fandom. They share their stories of how Dragon Ball inspired them to become actors or to become fight choreographers and composers. There's three of them in there actually, and it's a series that takes people places. Like the fight choreographer Lohan Busan, he was inspired by Dragon Ball while living in France, and it was always his dream to make a live action Dragon Ball film. So he ended up training with the Shaolin monks in China and the Wushu masters in Beijing, and then creating his own film studio called Z Team Films. With just the only goal was to make live action Dragon Ball Z, and he was able to finally do it with Light of Hope. So it's really great story, and all there's so many stories just like that of how Dragon Ball changed people's lives. And that book that you mentioned, Anime Impact, is similar. It talks about the power that anime has in changing people's lives and inspiring them to follow
yes.
their
Amr,
passion, which is what you
I
want to
was
do.
shocked to see how much anime can affect people. It is very nice to see how anime can affect people's life, because there is a lot of culture and a lot of good concepts inside the anime, and you must get touched by it, and it sure affect your life. What about yourself, Derek? How was your life changed after you follow your passion?
Well, now I do this full time. I'm the only Dragon Ball scholar in the world, and I made this job for myself. So it's something that I just think about it all day long, all night, and I have dreams about it and things like that. It's like it's a blessing that I can make money doing what I love to do. And
Of course.
I don't make nearly as much as I did as a website developer, right? Like It's a huge sacrifice, and it probably put my financial, I mean, it did put my financial security in jeopardy, and it has put my um, retirement plans and everything, all my savings and everything else on hold, right? Which is
Yes.
something that scares a lot of people. They think, well, what am I going to do for money? And especially if you have kids, that can be a real concern. I live, I'm just one man. I only have myself to take care of. I don't have a wife or children, so I'm able to do this, and I am free to follow my passion. But it becomes more difficult when you have those responsibilities. And so I totally understand why people are hesitant to follow their passion. It's because it means you have to sacrifice in other areas, and there's only so much time in the day, right, and energy. So
Yes.
it requires a lot of commitment and a lot of courage to make that decision in the first place. And so I think it's great that you are so interested in all of these different um, forms of entertainment and how you can create them yourself in Egypt. I mean, from writing to illustration to movies and everything about expressing yourself, because that's what it's really about. It's about being a genuine person and expressing yourself in a way that has value to you and hopefully
Yes.
has value to others. And I think it's the truth that whatever you have to say, there will be an audience for it, no matter what it is, and it can be the weirdest, darkest, most twisted stuff ever. And there will be an audience of people out there who love it and will want to buy
Yes.
more of it. So like
And
I prefer.
especially if you have some good concept or some things that can benefit others, especially if you have something like this, many people will hear you and you will impact their life good in a good way also as well. This will make you even better.
I agree. I think the art that comes out of an artist is an expression of the artist themselves, and
Yes.
wherever they are at in their lives and how they view the world. And as you go through the process of creating art, you are also, you know, going through a refinement process of yourself. So when you begin, your art is rather crude, and that could be the case with writing or illustration or painting or music, whatever it might be. You start out with the basics, but as you go, you refine your artwork, and then you also refine your own character and your discipline and your work ethic, and then as a result, your art gets better, and it's a mutually beneficial process, and it's called the path of an artist.
I'm a little bit confused about this, Derek. How to start? Should I start writing a book, or should I start with a blog, or should I start with making manga or learning animation? It's a lot. It's a lot to do. I'm a little bit confused. What is the best way to start from your advice?
That depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to make a novel, then starting to write every day and just putting the content out there on a blog can be a great way to do that.
Okay.
If you want to be an illustrator, like a manga artist, then putting out illustrations every day can and make a big difference. But the important thing is to just start and then to put it out there and get some constructive criticism. Get some people to help you improve your skills, because that'll make you improve faster. What I found was that I did 100 blog posts on my site before I created my first book, and the benefit of doing that was that I now had an audience. There were people who knew my name, and they knew my work, and they knew that I had value that was worth paying for. So then when the book came out, they said, "Oh, that's a book by Derek Padula. He does good stuff. This must be a good
Brilliant.
book."
Brilliant.
I will
Yeah.
trust that this is worth buying. And it was only $10, American dollars, which I think is affordable,
Of
and
course.
people are willing to take that risk to buy it. So that's an approach that I took, but that meant that for years I struggled um, without making any money on what I was doing. Right. So
Yeah.
if you put out a book first, then you might start to make money soon, or earlier. But the problem is you don't have an audience for it, so it could get lost among the sea of books that get published every day by
Yes.
self-publishing. People all over the world, especially on Amazon. There's thousands of books being published all the time. So how do you get noticed among that crowd? And that's where it helps to have an audience and a following on social media and things like that. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's like you don't know what to do first because you have to do everything first all at once, and it can be a little overwhelming. So the key is to just start simple and start small. And you have these big ideas, these really big
Yes.
dreams of what you want to accomplish, but you're not going to be able to accomplish them overnight. And uh, you can accomplish a small thing every night. So even if it's
Yes.
one thing, every single night after you come home from work at your engineering job or, people listening, whatever their job might be, you come home, you've got maybe 4 hours of free time, after dinner or something like that, and you've got time to do something.
Yes.
And it could be to watch TV, or it could be to play video games, or relax and listen to music or whatever. But that's the time that you have available to then work on your art and refine your artistic craft. So for me, I was
Yes.
writing every day, and I was always trying to write about something related to Dragon Ball's culture and history and fandom, whatever it was. And then eventually I'd come up with an article that I thought was good enough to publish, and then I would put it out there, and then people would comment on it, and they'd like it, and they'd share it, and build up a name for myself, over
Yes.
time. And
Yes.
it's a very,
I
very slow
understand. Yes.
process.
And when you have your own fans and your own audience, then they can see your work and appreciate it and start watching it and give you good criticism and buy it. So you have your own platform and your own audience.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
It makes a big difference. It's helpful to have your own platform because then you can control every aspect of it.
Yes.
If you're doing something on DeviantArt or something, like you're posting your art on DeviantArt, if there's something
Yes.
that DeviantArt doesn't like or somebody else decides to flag as inappropriate, then they can just take it
Yes.
down. So building your own website is a good idea, even if it's a free one. But at least you control, a portion of it, and then just always save your content, and then eventually maybe you can upgrade to a full site that you pay for each month with hosting fees and things like that. Because then you have your own platform and you have complete control over it. So that's what I prefer because I do everything myself. Um, but everybody does their own little thing, and it's really about just getting your content out there. So
Yes.
don't let there be any hurdles to stop you from doing your thing and being an artist. It's all about realistic, small, simple goals every day that allow you to get to your bigger goals. And as you do that and you keep putting out more content, you'll build a following, and then you'll eventually get to the point where you can achieve your bigger goals. And then you look back and you go, wow, I made it, like I'm here. That's pretty awesome. And you'll have
This
done
is
it. So
this is brilliant, Derek. I wish everybody who wants to follow their passion. I will publish this, and I wish everybody follow these steps to reach their goals, because this is gold really. This is how you can manage to pull it out. So this is brilliant. Thank you, Derek. Thank you really.
well, thank you, Amir. I appreciate you saying such kind words. It's a struggle. It's really hard. Yeah, you got to do everything yourself because you have to be a businessman on top of being an artist, and you have to learn how to market yourself, and you have to wear many different hats. Many different
Yes.
professions, and be a one-man team. Because when you're starting out, you don't have the money to hire all these people to do all these things for you. So, and if you're a guy who loves to obsess over details like I am, and you want creative control over everything, then that means you're gonna end up doing it by yourself anyway.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
This is brilliant. And what about the fans these days, Derek? What do you think about fans these days, for anime fans?
Well, they're passionate about what they love, and
Yes.
there's a massive amount of anime fans these days who did not grow up with the series or any series. Like I grew up with it in the mid to late 90s,
Yes.
before it was cool to like anime. And even in the early 90s, I was going to the video rental store and getting VHS tapes of anime that, nobody had ever heard of before. And I didn't know what they were. I was just looking at the box art and thought they were cool because there was no internet. There was no internet. You couldn't just look it up and see what it was. So you were always
Yes.
taking a risk to see what this crazy thing was. And I got bullied a lot in middle school and high school for being a nerd and liking things that people back then thought were dorky and nerdy and made you strange. So
Yes.
uh, to see the anime world now, where you can just search for anything, you say, I want to watch XYZ series online, and it's right there. You'll find it, and it'll either be a subscription service that you can pay for and you get like hundreds of other anime with it, or you can find
Yes.
a pirated copy of it because it's some obscure anime that hasn't gone mainstream yet and hasn't
Yes.
been licensed and dubbed. But you can find it, and it's all available there on the internet. So anime fans have a really uh, great advantage today, which is that there's an endless amount of options for them. So whatever genre they like, there's an anime for that, and I think that's just amazing. It's gotten to the point where like my dad watches anime now, and I'll walk out and I'll see him watching anime on his own. Like I didn't even tell him you should watch this series. It's good.
Yes.
He'll just be watching it on Netflix on his own, and he finds new series to watch, and he really likes it. So it's now mainstream, and every generation is watching anime, and that's the power of culture, and it's the power of storytelling, and the power of beautiful artwork and sound and music, and the voice actors do such a great job, and it's really the result of thousands of years of human beings expressing themselves and getting to this point where we have this global community and this network where people can consume anime and then create their own and share it with others. And it's really a great time to be an anime fan.
Yes, yes, this is true. Derek, in your journey, you did understand how to know your culture, and how can you dig deep in your culture and transfer it to artwork. How can this be done easily? If you can tell us, how can you transfer a culture to an artwork?
Well, I can tell you what Akira Toriyama did, which
Yeah.
is to first recognize that you are a product of your environment, and to think about where you were raised, how you grew up, the people that you were surrounded with, the education that you received, and all of the culture that you absorbed as part of that environment. Akira Toriyama grew up in a post-World War II Japan that
Yes.
was occupied by the American military, and
Yeah.
so he was he absorbed American culture as well as Japanese culture, and then Chinese culture and culture from Hong Kong as well, back when it was occupied by the British, and
Yeah.
he really fell in love with movies. And it was through movies that he gained most of his understanding of foreign cultures. So, in particular, World War II movies, and then Hong Kong kung fu movies starring Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. And then, of course, the Japanese pop culture of Godzilla and Ultraman and these superhero shows. And so what he did was he combined all of these different cultural elements together
Yeah.
and fused them into the framework of Journey to the West, which is the Chinese legend about the Monkey King. So he used that as his
Mm.
framework, and then he combined these different cultural elements from around the world into this framework. Uh, and as a result, there's something in Dragon Ball that appeals to everyone across the world, whether you're Japanese or American or European or Egyptian. There's parts of the culture that they know, natively as a member of that culture, that they then find in Dragon Ball. Like there's Egyptian culture in Dragon Ball as well, and Middle Eastern, Mr. Popo and Beerus, the
Ah.
god of destruction.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like the magic genie, and he's got a carpet that he rides on, and all kinds of things like that. Um, Toriyama just borrows elements from different cultures and he fuses them together, which is why I call Dragon Ball a fusion manga. It's a series that combines cultures together. And so if you are curious, like, well, how do I put my own culture into this series and how do I create my own, uh, local, manga that has
Yeah,
my specific elements that I grew up with? Well, just try doing the same thing, take what you're
yes,
passionate about and then combine that with a story that is unique to your culture and create a series that appeals to people beyond your culture. So somebody who isn't familiar with Egyptian culture, like in your specific case, could take a classic Egyptian story and then combine it with the things that you're interested in. For Toriyama, he did Hong Kong films and World War II, and then he did sci-fi elements like Star Wars and the Terminator and Aliens, and he put all that stuff in there, which you think wouldn't make sense, but it works so beautifully. And it appeals to everyone across the world. So I think it's a formula that other people can follow as well. And it's really about, the whole topic of this conversation is how to follow your passion. And that's what Toriyama did. He created a series that he wanted to read. And it turns out
yeah,
that there were other people who wanted to read it as well because it was so filled with these amazing cultural elements, and it was funny and lighthearted and action oriented, and it was just beautiful as well. He's such a great illustrator. So all of those things came together to make it so successful, and I think that's something that can be emulated if you want to do it yourself.
yes.
Just apply that same formula to your own uh, life and experiences and the culture that you've grown up in, and uh, give it a shot. Put it out there in the world and see how well it does.
This is brilliant, Derek. Thank you, really. Derek, you're such an inspiration for everybody to follow his passion because you did manage to make it and you did it beautifully. And I will put your ideas and I will put your example for other people, especially in Egypt, because you're such a role model for people who can follow their passion and be successful and happy in what they're doing.
Well,
Thank
thank
you
you
really
very
very
much.
much.
That's very nice to hear. Thank you, Amir.
No, thank you, Derek. Thank you, really. And I will do. I wish this is one of my dreams to make our culture to everybody to see it same as Japanese. I will. This is a dream for me. I will take it small steps, as you said, and I'm very honored to be your friend, and I will always keep discussing with you all my steps, and I wish you help me till I reach this goal.
Well, that'd be great. Yeah, I look forward to seeing your name on your first book.
Oh, come on! Thank you, Derek.
Yeah.
I wish. What about you, Derek? What is new for you? What is your new work, or what are you doing now?
Well, I'm currently writing a book called Dragon Ball Language, and it's all
Okay.
about the lingual aspects of Dragon Ball and how Akira Toriyama uses his native Japanese language and then combines that with English foreign loan words and French, and then combines that with Chinese and how he names his characters. Most of them are named after food, very silly types of things like that. But also the visual aspects, the visual language, and the body language of the series, and how Toriyama expresses himself through his characters, and it also teach the reader how to learn Japanese through Dragon Ball. So I think it's a book that
Yeah.
will really appeal to aspiring linguists and people who are at university who want to learn more about Japanese, and they can do it through Dragon Ball, all through Dragon Ball language.
Brilliant, brilliant, Derek.
Well,
You
thanks.
did you visit Egypt before, Derek?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Did did you visit Egypt before?
Oh no, I've never been to Egypt. I'd like to go someday. I have been
Yes.
to the big Egyptian museum exhibits in Los Angeles, and those were very nice. But I've never been to Egypt itself.
Okay. I wish someday you can come here and I will show you a lot of good stuff here in Egypt.
Well, that'd be great. I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Well, did you have
Uh,
anything else you wanted to ask me before I go?
No, no, no. This is more than enough, Derek. And thank you really for your time, and thank you for this good talk. I'm very honored to talk to you, and I'm very happy with this conversation. Really, thank you.
Well, it was my pleasure. Thanks, Amir.
Thanks, Derek, and I hope you get well soon. And I will keep in touch.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Okay. Thanks, Derek. Bye bye.